Okay, so going to make a mug today. We're using student version of 3ds Max 2017, which should be pretty similar to the version that the main target are using. So to start off with, we are going to need to put in a cylinder for our mug. So starting off with a cylinder. Generic mug size cylinder, that'll do. Looks sort of mug sized. And what I'm going to do from here, because at the moment we can't see the edges of our faces. So the first thing I'm going to do is I'm just going to set this to show edged faces. Now the usual thing would be to come down and go edged faces. I tend not to do that because that puts edged faces onto everything, whether you've got it selected or not, which can create an issue in terms of being able to see what you've done, especially if you end up working with a high poly count. So I'm actually going to go to display selected with edged faces, and then anything else from that point won't show with an edged face. So this should now be coming up, and there's our edged faces. Next step, I'm going to go to the Modify tab, and now that we've got our edged faces on, we can see that there is going to be a slight problem. If we work with this cylinder as it is, with this solid top, which is one segment, we aren't going to have a nice thick rim on our mug, because the rim is only going to be the width of one of these faces. So we need to change a setting in order to be able to manipulate this more easily. And the bit we want to change is a bit called cap segments. So I'm going to put this up from 1. That looks good. 4 should be fine. And now we've got all these different faces on the top that we can work with. I'm now going to put a modifier onto this. Now when you click on the modifiers, you may have to wait a little while for it to come up, because as you can see from this one, there are a lot of modifiers available in 3ds Max to use. So just be a little bit patient with it until it comes up. And then when it comes up, you press E on the keyboard to jump down to the edit options, and we're going to select edit poly, because we're going to be working just with the faces. When you go and put the edit poly modifier on, it will come up with a lot of different options. The only options that we're going to want to use at the moment are the selection options, and we're going to want to be using the where's it gone? Maybe because I haven't got anything selected. We are going to be using another selection which only opens after we've selected the faces. So select the faces. That gives us the edit polygons, which is what I was looking for. So we're going to be using the selection and the edit polygons menu. But first, we need to select the faces that we're going to edit. So I'm going to start off selecting one face. If I then hold the Shift key down on the keyboard and go to the shape beside it, it will give us a ring. And when I click, it will select that ring. Now I could go around and select all of these as well using the Control key and clicking each one, but there's a button over here that says Grow, which is what I'm going to use. And that has now selected all of these faces here. You could potentially keep growing if you have more of your cap segments in this. However, because I've now got one cap segment left unselected, which is what you want, I'm going to stop with the grow there. But you can keep growing and growing and growing until eventually you get all the way around. If you do go too far, the shrink button beside the grow will take you back. So I've now got this bit selected. This is going to make the inside of my mug. But at the moment, I think my mug rim is going to be a little bit chunky. So I'm going to get the Select and Uniform Scale tool. Now, because I don't want this, I only want this to grow in an outward direction, I'm not going to go for the middle because that grows in all directions. I could do it with just the X and then do the Y, but I will probably lose my spherical shape. So I'm going to go in between the X and Y on this diagonal here, because this diagonal will do both of those axes at the same time. And you can select any two axes you want with that, and then the middle does everything. So I'm just going to drag that and make that a bit bigger. And now I have a slightly better rim shape. Next step that we need to do is we actually need to take this down. So we've got the inside of our mug. Now, I would suggest using different viewports for this. At the moment, I've got this one set to just the one perspective viewport, but I'm actually going to change this around so that I've got the side view, in this case the front, and I've got the top view. I'm just going to shrink that in. I'm going to change this left to perspective, and I'm going to take the wireframe off, set that to default shading, and display selected with edged faces. So making sure that all of that is back on if it does change the views that you're looking at. Now, the reason why I've put these on is if I zoom in on this view, I will be able to see when I'm extracting from this view how far down the bottom of my mug is going. So I want the extrude tool for this because I want to take these sides down and create new sides with it. If I was to just try the move tool and just move it down, it will stretch the inside down and put it on an angle, which is not what we want. We want the inside to stay up so that we have a rim for the cup. So we're going to use the extrude tool, and we're going to get this cursor with the blowout 3D box. And then I'm just going to click and drag this down. Now, it doesn't matter if you stop on the way down. So I could go all the way down to the bottom in one hit, or if I wanted to, I could create additional faces by going part way down and then letting go. I go part way down and let go. And if you look in the bottom left window, you should see a red line that's moving up and down. That is the base. If you don't do what I've just done and deselect it, that is the base of my model. So I'm just going to take this and put it down as far as I want it. So we're going to put that there. That looks like a good depth for a cup. And now I have the inside of my cup. So that's pretty much the main bulk of the cup done. So we're missing at the moment a handle. Let's add a handle to the mug. We're going to do it using a box. Now there are two ways to do handles, and this is the simple way for doing a handle. So I'm just going to grab this box, and I'm going to make a long, thinnish box by clicking and dragging, letting go, moving my mouse up and left clicking. And before I click off my box or do anything else, I'm going to put some length and width and height segments in here. The more segments you have in, the better the bend that you will get for the handle. So there is my box with its segments, and I'm going to now go back to the modify list. From the drop down on the modify list from the handle, we want the bend tool. And this is where the number of segments that you have really does come into play. Now, because I'm going to want the sides to go level so I can put them into a surface on my mug, I'm going to set this to 180 degrees. So 180 degrees set onto the z-axis has given me this shape. That's not what I want in the slightest. So what we do is we just change the bend axis. So the axis that I'm going to want is going to be the y-axis. If I do the x-axis, that'll be really good for a piece of pipe, but not particularly useful for making a handle. So we want the y-axis on there. Then it's facing the wrong way. So if we get the rotate tool, work out what direction we need to rotate it in, I would suggest putting the angle snap on so that we can do this to exactly 180 degrees. And it will go up in increments of 5. And by 180, obviously I mean 90. There we go. This one, this direction, we can swing to 180. So now we've got a handle which is set to go into our mug. And with the aid of the move tool and the view on our wireframes, we should be able to get this to line up quite nicely. And what you might find is you do need to move it up so that it actually sits. That's quite a big handle, so I'm going to resize my handle just very slightly, only on the z-axis. Actually, it might make it a bit narrower as well. There we go. So I've now got a narrow handle coming out from my cup. Now, as I said, this is a basic handle. Do check the top view to make sure that you're not actually protruding through into the cup, although that would admittedly make an interesting handle. And then just make sure that your handle is positioned where you want it on your mug. Right, so we've now got a mug shape, but it's very rough. You can see it's rough because you can see all the straight lines that make up the center of the mug. We need to make these two shapes combine and smooth. Going back to the plus tab, we want to go now to the compound objects. Select the compound objects and select Boolean as the operator. It's already got the cylinder because we've already had the cylinder clicked. And we're going to add the operand of our box. Now, an operand is just a shape that is being used. That puts our box in. It's already on union, so we can leave that there, or we can set it to merge to put the two shapes together. Now, when I deselect, you'll notice that the box has gone invisible over there. And when I go back over to the Modify tab, I can deselect it, and when I select it again, it's all one object. Back into the Modify list, pressing T this time and looking for Turbo Smooth. With Turbo Smooth, be careful with the number of iterations. The more iterations you have, the smoother your shape will be. However, the longer it will take to render and the more processing power the shape will use. So there is my smoothed off mug. Definitely looks more like a mug now, although I'm not so sure I'm happy about this bit. But we could fix that by going backwards before we've booleaned and just putting the handles in a little bit more. I'm going to leave it like that, but I am going to take one of the iterations out so it's less pronounced. Now, our mug looks very pretty in blue, but we also want to make sure that we might want to add a colour to it. So we also make sure that it's a nice colour and has the shine that we want. Over here you have a material editor. Now mine is set to open on this material editor, the compact material editor. Yours may start off on the slate material editor, which looks like this. Or like that did a moment ago. There we go. This is the slate material editor. When you really start getting into 3D modeling, you can go in and use the Slate Material Editor. It gives you much more control over how materials link together. But for starting off, and for materials where you don't have a need for a lot of materials in one scene, the Compact Material Editor is just as good. Now, it may come up with these defaults that are showing on here, or it may not. It depends on the settings of 3ds Max when you open it. You can change the settings by clicking on physical material, and again, depending on how it's set up, will depend what you get on these. I'm going to go Autodesk Ceramic in this one, because this will give me porcelain settings or generic ceramics. So I'm just going to do this, just a clay fired mug, not anything particular. I'm going to use a color, and I'm going to have some nice purple mug, because we can. So there is my purple mug. There's a preview of how the colour is applied over there. And then to apply to the mug, just click and drag, and it will apply across the whole mug. And my finished mug. Run to the production. Now if I want to save this just as an image, save image is up there, and I will go and save it where I wanted to save the mug to. Our first mug with a simple handle. We're going to look at how we can make a more complicated and more integrated handle for our mug. So I've already made a second mug, or the base of it at least, and I've stopped at the point where we would look at adding the handle. Now we're going to use some different tools for adding the handle, but first thing you want to do is you want to go to the top view. And the reason for this is when we draw the handle, it draws it on a flat plane. So we need to go to our Create tab, and this time we want to change from geometry to shapes. And we're going to do a line. A couple of settings for the line that we want on the creation method: initial type set to smooth, drag type set to smooth. And what this does is when we start creating our handle, it starts to create the shape for us. Now you want to try and make this so that you've got quite a few points going down into the line. It makes it a smoother line when we come to add it to our mug. And when you get to the final point, after your final point, you want to right click to close the line off. And we can now go to the Modify tab, and our line is selected. I've still got the angle snap on from our earlier handle, so that's fine. And now I want to rotate. And I'm going to rotate 390 degrees so that our handle is upright. And just while I'm on the top view, I'm going to line my handle up with my mug and bring this into here. And stop probably about there. Now if I swing this around, we can see we've got this issue where our handle is falling off the bottom of our mug. So I'm just going to move that up and grab my scale tool. I'm going to scale it on the X and the Z axis because I don't want my handle to be too wide. And let's try about there. Let's try aligning it about there. And I just want to move on the X and the Z angle again. So make sure that it's going into my mug. And if I go to the top, I'm a little bit adrift. So we're going to move it to there, and I'm just going to bring that back slightly. There is my handle set up. Now I'm not going to worry about the gap at the bottom. We'll see why in a minute. But that is my line set up, ready to go. So now I'm going to select my mug. And you'll notice on this one, I have put in a lot more segments, a lot more faces on the sides of my cylinder. So if I just quickly go to my cylinder, I've got 26 height segments and 31 slides. I'm actually not going to do that because I've already applied something. And 31 sides. I mean, ideally, you probably want more than that for a smooth shape. But this will suffice quite nicely for now. So I can see what I'm doing a little bit better. I'm just going to get my zoom tool and zoom in on the side. And what this allows me to do is just to sort of fine tune a little bit where my handle is. So I do want to move this up very slightly, just so it's coming out of, and I go back on my cylinder, just so that when I highlight it, it is coming out of one of the faces. Make sure that your polygon selection is on. Click on face where your handle is going to attach to. And this time, from the edit polygons, rather than going to extrude, we want to go to extrude along spline. But before we do that, we want to click the little box beside it, which gives us our settings. And if the settings are in the way, you can just click and drag them out of the way for a moment. Once you've got the settings up, press the actual extrude along spline button and pick up your line. Now you'll notice that my line has done something very strange. That is because of this button here. It's aligning the face as it comes out to the face on here, rather than it going up and following that curve. So we want to untick the box, and that will bring our shape out following our line. Number of segments, if you increase them, you will get a smoother line from your handle. So I'm going to do probably about that many. And don't do what I just did and click off. Press the tick in the bottom corner to accept the handle. Now, I probably should have moved it in, but I'm having a little bit of an Art Deco cup. I'm just going to come off that. And there is my shaped handle. And it does pretty much follow the shape of the line that I put in. So if I zoom back out now, the good thing about this handle is that it is automatically part of my cylinder shape that I started with. So because I've used the Edit Poly modifier and I've pulled it along the line, I don't need to worry about doing any kind of complex shape. So I can now go straight to my Turbo Smooth, and that will smooth my mug off, it will smooth my line off, and why not, we'll go for 2 iterations again. And now I have a cup with a fancy handle. And I can do the same thing to give it a texture. I'm going to go to Material Editor, and I'm going to have a set of purple mugs. You can see the difference quite nicely there between the two handles. And if I render the production, I need to move it down slightly. It's just having a bit of a think. But you can see the difference that doing the handle in different ways makes to the mug.